Hi, today we're going to talk about typography. The type tool is the second most important tool in Illustrator, and we're going to spend 3 weeks on this tool. That's how important it is. So a little background about the terminology and the use of type will help you immensely to use this tool to its fullest capability. So to begin with, let's have some history. Type was set in metal slugs in the beginning. And you can see here, this is a drawing of it, type was measured from the top of the slug to the bottom of the slug. And the space in between is the point size. Now, these slugs would be put on a stick and put in a line, therefore a line of type, and put in a galley. And to make spaces between the lines, pieces of lead were put between the lines. And these pieces of lead were called leading. And today we still call the space between lines leading. Now here's an old linotype machine, and I actually used one of these. This was used by sitting, and it had a keyboard, and it would throw slugs of type into a line, and it sped up type very much. Uh, in those days, mostly men did the typesetting because the metal type was so heavy. Now, type was stored in these types of drawers that were decompartmentalized. And in the uppercase were the large letters, and lowercase were the small letters. Therefore, we get our term upper and lower case. Now, there are styles in type, and these little legs are called serifs. You see on the type here? There's type that is without serifs, or sans serif. Now, there are parts of the type that may give it its character. There is the serif, the ascender, the descender. There is the counter, that is the space in O's, P's, G's, A's, etc. There is the X height, and very often too on the O's and the P's there is an angle here too that gives it character. But a very important element of type is an invisible one called the baseline. And the type sits on this. And this is going to be important in you setting type. Now you'll notice that some of the letters come under the baseline, such as this O. This is designed specifically like that by the designer to give balance to the type. Okay, so a typeface refers to a specific design of an alphabet. And here are a few Times New Roman, Technical, Algerian, and Broadway. Now, a font is a complete alphabet of one size, one typeface, and one style. And some of these characters and numbers that you see here. And if you think about how type was originally set, you would know that there would be a set font in each one of these sizes, typefaces, and styles. Now, type is measured in points. A point is 1/72 of an inch. There are 12 points to a pica and 6 picas to an inch. Now, when measuring type, we measure a little above the ascender and a little below the descender, depending on what the designer designed, how he designed it. Now, there are type styles too, such as Roman, which is up and down, and italic, which is on the side like this. Sometimes Roman is called normal or regular. Sometimes italic is called oblique. Now there are different weights in typesetting too. There is light and regular, sometimes called normal. There is semi-bold, sometimes called demi. There is bold and extra bold, which is sometimes called ultra and black. There are widths in type styles too. Condensed of a face, which would make the letters thinner, and extended, which would make them broader. Now, there are family of typefaces, and here this one happens to be of Switzerland, and you can see we have a normal, a regular, a black, which is the same as extra bold, a condensed, which is a little slimmer, an inserata, here, inserat, excuse me, a light and a narrow. And just like we look like members of our family, so do typefaces with different characteristics. So when choosing a typeface, you must consider the aesthetics, whether the typeface appeals to you, whether it's appropriate for your audience. I mean, you would not use a script for a child's book, for example. And remember that type has personality, and it can lend a great personality to anything that you do. Now, legibility is important. Make sure that the thins can be seen on the type. Make sure that the counters aren't closing on you. Make sure that it can be reproduced properly. Now, when choosing a typeface, make sure that it's readable. Make sure when you set it that you don't make lines that are too long, or just the opposite, lines that are too short, excuse me. Now, do not use more than 2 typefaces. Now, remember I said typefaces. I didn't say, that you couldn't use different weights or like an italic within that. But if you use more than 2, it would look very unprofessional. Now, you're going to have to, in your career, you're going to be called on to match type sooner or later. Now, in the old days, we used to match the G. But now we have this wonderful typeface called Identifont.com. And you just go to it and you put in your information, and I'm telling you 90% of the time you will find your typeface. Now, why is it hard to find typefaces? Well, number one, in the beginning, typeface, they would have about 10 new typefaces every year. The International Type Corporation would bring out these typefaces and they would license them. Well, when the computer came out, Bitstream and Microsoft did not want to pay licenses for typefaces. So what they did, they redrew the typefaces. So even though they're quite similar to the licensed typefaces, they're not exactly the same. For example, Microsoft's Arial is very similar to Helvetica. So, you could maybe interchange it. It will be slightly different. Most people wouldn't notice. So, readability involves not only the typeface, but how it's set, the size, the measure, the margins, etc. So you can see this is a fairly long line, and this is short lines. both of them are not that great to read. Now, rules for using vertical type. You should center justify vertical type, and don't use any more than 2 words. And really, you should keep it to 5 letters, no more than 7. I live in a town where all the street signs are vertical, and they are very difficult to read. Okay, so let's talk about leading, or line spacing is another name for it. Here's 24-point typeset on 20 with 24-point leading, and you can see it's pretty tight. Here is 24-point type with 28-point leading. You've got more space between. And for the first time with computer type, we could set negative leading. And here is 24-point type down here with 22-point leading. Now, you can do this, but you have to be careful that your ascenders don't hit your descenders. Okay, so X height also affects type. And you can see these are all 3 of these 58-point type. But because their X height is different, one appears smaller than the other. Now, when mixing type, make sure that you have enough leading so that the lines aren't overlapping. Now, another thing we're going to talk about is letter spacing or tracking. It's called tracking in Illustrator and all the Adobe products. You can see the top typography has normal tracking and the bottom one has tight. And we're going to work on that during our lessons. Now, kerning is the visual space between 2 letters. And Adobe does a very good job of automatically kerning, but you may want to kern certain words yourself, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. Word spacing is another thing, which is separate from letter spacing. The space you have between words helps you to read it. Now there's also type justification. Left, right, center, asymmetrical, or unjustified or ragged right. Now, during the class, in one of our classes, we're going to learn how to read a type gauge. And so we'll be going on now with our type lesson. Thank you. Goodbye.